Hey there, SCP fans. My name is Grigory Karpin, and this is Simply Creative People, the show about SCP creatives, be they authors, artists, or offsite content creators like YouTube and TikTok. We're focused on bridging the gap between various fans and serving as an introduction to different concepts and stories on the wiki. So, many welcomes to all, and let's get started. So hello, and welcome to episode 13 of Simply Creative People.
13.
I'm Grigory What?
13 indeed.
Oh, fucking. Anyway, so I'm Grigory Karpin, and I'm joined by...
We're gonna need a hairy blank.
Nice. I mean, I'm saying that to be supportive, but it wasn't your best work.
You wouldn't even let me do one last week, you fucking overreaching bastard.
You said thank you and everything.
Yeah, that was just diplomacy.
Oh, that's another word for lies.
Yes.
And Lord, I'm gonna need you to say your name out loud.
So, Lord ZooNew is how I pronounce it. And
oh my! Yeah, I was gonna get that very
yeah.
wrong.
See the construction.
It's Roman.
Of it. Yeah, exactly.
I get it.
Like you assume in classical Latin, or really most Latin, except for like modern stuff. All of the U's and V's are largely interchangeable.
I get it.
But
it's because they used to carve it into rock. I thought it was like a number.
No. I mean, N's not a...
That's funny.
Shit.
I just thought it was XVNV.
Yeah, that's pretty much
like
what
a
it's...
joke on
yeah.
envy. Like, this is so funny.
Oh, this is good. The whole
Nobody
podcast is just going to pivot into, no, that's not how my name's pronounced. How have you been pronouncing it?
See, because, Harry and I just, picked names that everyone would just sort of... But it is funny, even with, Victim, I was just talking to someone today where someone was just like, I don't understand. I was listening to the podcast. How could you call it Victim? I'm like, well, first of all, I made it up. But,
I helped get the tag and I call it VKTM, so deal with it.
Yeah, and anyone can say whatever they want. That's the thing. I don't care.
So are we still... Was that Lord's introduction? Because that kind of blew.
Yeah.
We're going
to do a full thing.
Yeah.
So, Lord, you've been a member of the wiki since at least 2017.
Right? If you go by my account age, 2014. If you go by an interesting bit of trivia is that my account is exactly 1 day older than Green Wolf's, and yet he is about 10 times more prolific than I am.
He's 10 times more prolific than most people, though, so...
Yes, well...
Yeah, he's written a lot of good stuff, but yeah, a lot of stuff.
Great writer.
So and I'm not sure why I thought this, but, I don't feel like we had talked before, maybe, end of 2020. I feel like it was last year. And so I kind of thought that you were a little newer, not because of the way you act or anything, just because I hadn't seen you around. And when I was looking through these articles, I was like, oh, no, you posted something 5-6 years ago. So
yeah, it's it was one of those things where I posted the articles years ago when I had, I guess, more free time and it was one of those during one of those many phases where I had the brain space and time to spare on SCP stuff. And then
yeah, sure. Of course.
Yeah, then I just sort of drifted away for a few years and after the pandemic hit, it was very much one of those things where, well, might as well actually try looking for an actual writing community, as opposed to, say, a whole bunch of random writers just screaming into the void and not actually paying attention to each other's works.
That's right. Now they've got 1,000 writers all screaming at each other and not reading each other's works.
Yeah, I was going to lead into that, but
I'm going to try to steal as many of your jokes as possible since you make my life hell on a regular basis.
Oh, is this going to be like a call-out podcast? Is that...
Well, I spend most of my time attacking Grigory. I think I might as well attack the guest from time to time.
No, that's
now,
true.
To be fair, if anyone sort of deserves it, it would be... Actually, I don't think I've ruined your work all that much. It's mostly been Ralliston's, if we're being honest.
No, not my work, just my life.
Oh, sorry about that.
just your generalized field of extraordinarily accomplished and detailed, sophisticated trollery. And yet, you're also one of the most impressive people writing, because you'll just occasionally bang out something amazing like the Goldbaker Rhines SCP that we definitely need to make sure we plug.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
You are an enigma.
That's how I like it.
I think you're fucking transparent. No. I'm kidding. So how did you originally find SCP?
So this is
if you know.
probably going to nail down my age within like a five-year band, but it was from the SCP mod on the Minecraft forums. And it's like, when you see that sort of like it's a Minecraft game modification, right? Like, they just take all the big popular SCPs, like 106, 173, 096, all the generic ones, and they just throw them into Minecraft as murder monsters. And then there were also a few more. There were also like a few stranger ones, though. Like, literally, they had the red pond in there. They also had like that
makes sense.
drowning portrait. Like, all the stuff that's easy to implement in gameplay. And like, when you stumble across that stuff, right, it's very much a, wow, this is really creepy. It's easy enough to Google, and then you Google it, and it leads you to the wiki, and it's all history from there, you know?
You know, honestly, so I avoided for years Minecraft. This is gonna sound terrible, but like, I just kind of looked at it and was like, oh, it looks kind of like a Lego game. I don't know, I'm not interested. And during the pandemic, I can't remember who convinced me to give it a shot, and I finally did. And the thing that I find most compelling about it, and my opinion on it has completely changed because I think it's brilliant, but the thing that most compels me about it is how it's like a stealth horror game.
Yes.
Not stealth like Metal Gear, but like,
yes,
it's not advertised as a horror game, and yet I have been more terrified of falling into lava or getting cornered by a skeleton in that game than almost anything in Dark Souls. And the idea of turning it into like an SCP murder monster thing makes perfect fucking sense.
Absolutely. I play Minecraft on hardcore, so just to get the adrenaline. Just it is only
no casual mode here.
It is only a horror game for me.
Yeah. So I think I told you this, Harry, but I don't think I've talked about it on this podcast. So I was very late adopter, and I didn't really look anything up. I just like figuring out games as they go. And, you know, I struggled with some of the recipes and stuff like you do, but I didn't know the reason why you need to sleep other than creating yourself a home base, like where you would respawn. And so I had no idea that the wraiths were appearing because I hadn't slept.
Oh, no.
And yeah, and so I
told him.
Did all this, yeah, I did all this work. I mean, hours and hours of work. This was when I was unemployed. Turning like an underground railway into an above ground railway because it eventually got to the point where it was like level with, you know, and instead of digging further down, I just started creating these glass hallways for my railway to go through with little doors that would get out so that I could travel without being attacked all the time. He was by these fucking things.
He was like, and I don't know how to make the birds stop fighting me. I'm like, and
Harry was like, what birds?
Oh, birds?
What do you mean? And I'm like,
the
birds! Well, I guess, I don't know. And they were just like, and I had a giant, not a giant, but I have a fairly large plot of like land to like grow crops as well. Like this, a rather large garden, I would say. And I just created an entire, like a 3-story wall around the entire thing and then glass on the top because I wasn't sure if like it needed sunlight to grow. I didn't know how realistic, you know, Minecraft was. Yeah, like, so I was just, you know, trying to figure, and it just, I mean, it made it more fun because once I realized I could just make them go away by sleeping, I was kind of like, oh, all right, I guess I didn't have to do all this. But
and for Creative Corner, we're going to find a way to turn this ridiculous story into an SCP.
They've already done that. Anyway, so yeah, so you've written, what, like 25, 30 things, right, Lord?
Closer to 40 at this point.
Oh.
Though, like, I feel like 5 of those are hubs, 5 are collabs that I came in the last second of, so probably closer to 30.
I mean, those count. I mean, I have a shit ton of hubs. Sometimes I just steal other people's stuff and make a hub out of it. Daedra.
Daedra, he said.
Anyway,
he said Daedra. That's amazing. The Daedra Hub. I can't wait for the Daedra Hub. Is that going to go with the
What's
Bloodborne
Daedra
canon
from
as well?
again?
Morrowind. Elder Scrolls.
Oh, yeah, fucking Elder Scrolls.
The Daedra Hub.
Davite. Yeah. Anyway.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I don't care about
It's good.
Elder Scrolls.
Well, fuck you. Okay, we can't have that conversation. Keep going.
I didn't say it was a bad game. I said I don't care.
Yeah, that was still so much. Keep going. Move along.
So, we didn't do any creative discussions last time because we were kind of pressed for
We
time.
weren't creative last time at all.
That's right.
I don't even think I read half of what we were... I was supposed to be thinking that to myself, not saying it out loud. Keep going. I did. I read them all.
Bad host. Okay.
I don't need to read to make fun
I thought
of
we could... That's true, but you're not just here to do that.
Oh, shit, really?
Yeah.
Shit.
So this time I thought we would talk, and I thought it was Harry's idea to talk about dialogue, because, I think all three of us have got some good experience with dialogue.
Yeah, I like words and talking.
Mm-hmm. Good job. Aiko the other day told me that she didn't like words. She didn't want to be an author, but she liked writing dialogue, and I was like, hey, those are related, right?
Yeah, with dialogue, it's like you see like a ton of guides online about how to write good dialogue, right? And I mean, I wouldn't say I necessarily follow all of it, but like a lot of the things that people say over the course of a regular conversation they're just filler words, like stuff to drag a conversation along. And the nice thing about dialogue is that in theory you can just cut it out because it's boring. And I would say that, like, see, a unique thing about the clinical format of SCPs is that the dialogue, you can get away with, like, just pure dialogue logs.
Yes.
With action panels.
Yes.
But in another sense, that forces you to define the characters' voices much more clearly, because you do not have that benefit of internal monologue. You do not have that benefit of omniscient narrator, or you almost don't even have the benefit of body language descriptions. So, like, I wouldn't go so far as to say that the SCP format is almost this exercise in making clear character voices that are distinct from each other, but it does get pretty close.
I think doing it well, I think making a good interview log is that. I think there's a lot of examples of SCPs that are not that. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, because you want, I mean, though I will put in a little bit of body language description, you're right, you don't want a lot of, everyday description, especially when it's just an interview. It's two people sitting across the desk from each other, so why would there be a description of how they looked in that moment? Unless it's really important. So, there is a lot more focus on, like, bringing out the characterization in the actual words being used. And I try to avoid, like, emphasis as well in interview logs, because it seems very not clinical. I do it sometimes, but most of the time not.
It's one of those things that's acceptable for the art, but, like, probably wouldn't fly if it were real.
Yeah. You gotta make some acceptable breaks from reality for stuff like that.
Something you were just saying about how dialogue is sort of a slimmer down version of actual speaking. Like, I do like to keep about, I would say, like 25% of the stupid little idioms in my dialogue. The things that people just say to keep a conversation going. Because I feel like when you're too efficient at storytelling through dialogue, it reads as false.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so, so I wouldn't want to make it sound exactly like a real conversation, but I want to include a little bit of that,
Yeah, it's a balance.
Yeah.
I feel like, in a sense, that touches on that cliche, almost, of earlier SCP writing having these interviewers who basically act like robots with minimal empathy towards these over-the-top, highly stressed-out victims/civilians.
Yeah, and then always ending with, this interview is over.
Pretty much, yeah.
It ropes them right into writing robots That was very alliterative. When they insist on referring to them as SCP-6219, SCP-6219 the whole time, like there are certain things in that Series 1 interview dialogue format that almost prevents characterization from happening.
And it's not just Series 1. I mean, that stuff continues till today to some extent. I've had, not disagreements, but like genuine like discussions with people about like, well, what does that actually serve? If you're interviewing a humanoid SCP as a doctor, what does it actually serve to like rigidly hold on to that? All you're doing is making that individual alienated.
Yeah, if you're,
and they're less likely to talk to you.
Yeah, if the point of the interview is to acquire information from a sentient entity, why is your first act to make them hostile?
Like, I think it would be much more interesting if someone was trying to tell the story of like the very cold, not cruel Foundation with a layer of like bullshit like humanism to the interviews, where like I don't know exactly how this would be accomplished, but where like it's clear that like this is an act. They're trying to get them on, on the researcher's side to create that rapport. Yeah,
Grigori's about to start his Site 17 Deep Well Archives arc.
I've not because I dislike. I mean, that stuff's amazing, but I just have so many things going.
Oh my god!
No more projects. But yeah, I mean, I think as basic advice, and I think we've all heard it a bunch of times, but I'm still constantly running into people that have never heard this piece of advice. Say your dialogue out loud to yourself at your desk. Yep. Just do it. It sounds weird, of course it does. But part of the reason it sounds weird is because what you wrote is weird. You wrote, there's that uncanny valley when it comes to character voices. If it feels like a robot or some sort of alien is speaking, that could work if you're trying to go for that. But if you're just trying to have two people talking, and it sounds weird when you say it out loud, it's because it is, and you need to go back and just kind of try to make it more. It's grounded, not realistic. Yeah. Right? You want to make it feel like it's coming from a real person, but you don't want it to actually sound like a recorded conversation, because as we see, it's already established, that's fairly boring.
Yeah, pretty much. If you try to read bad dialogue out loud, you'll amend it, or it won't come out of your mouth. And also, if you try to rewrite bad dialogue side by side, as with any other writing, you'll actually find yourself correcting it as well, because even reading bad writing, you'll want to correct it, but speaking bad dialogue out loud, you will hear how tin it sounds to your ear, and you'll be like, no, that's not right.
Yeah, I don't do it anymore.
I haven't done it for years.
I'm so fancy, but like I've internalized a lot of those things. And I feel like for both of us, and Lord, you as well, I'm sure you've gotten this compliment, because I feel like your dialogue's very good. I think the three of us have kind of, I wouldn't say we're masters at it, but like pretty good at it. Sometimes I fail at the other parts of SCP, but I feel like the characterization through dialogue is always pretty, not easy, but like I kind of sink myself into those spots. But up until, I was doing a lot more writing, I would still do that. I mean, my early SCPs, I hadn't written for a moment, and I totally did that, even though I was in my 30s, and I'd written, several novels, not published, but whatever. Mm-hmm. So there's really never a point where you're too experienced to do it. So even if somebody's listening to this and they've written like 10 things and they're like, oh, I know what I'm doing, I wouldn't need to do that, it could still help.
Mm-hmm. I would say that a tip I would actually have is, like, we all know that one of the best ways to get good at writing is to do a lot of reading.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
And I would almost say in this case, if you want to go for, like, that hyper-stylized, exaggerated, yet somehow still grounded in realistic dialogue, the best thing to read would probably be theater, honestly, like plays.
Yeah, it depends on the play.
Well, yes.
Well, that makes sense, because they have to get a lot across with the dialogue.
Yeah.
Of course, the nuance there is like the play it's written with the knowledge that the actor will be good enough to actually convey the emotion.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, because I think a lot of plays have really incredible dialogue. But I also think a lot of plays are written in such a way that they really only fit the stage. there's a certain, melodrama to it that is very, even in the most serious of plays, that you wouldn't see in a film. I think it's why most plays that are turned into films, are kind of missing something. Not all.
There's also a lot of plays that are written to be read in the format that they are written in, and the format that they are written in looks exactly the same as a dialogue log for the SCP wiki, so the parallel is there.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I would just be careful which play, because some plays are so stylized.
Well, yes, don't use Hamlet, but don't use Waiting for Godot.
Don't read Waiting for Godot.
Sorry?
Just forget about Waiting for Godot. Everyone, please. It's so boring.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
No, I have nothing to say about... This is an SC. This is a podcast about the shit statue fanfic site. I'm not going to talk about Samuel Beckett.
It's about anything.
I mean, the thing about SCPs though is they are sort of unique as a format, so there's always going to be that level of adaptation you take when you go from one medium to another.
Yeah.
And this is really no exception.
No, totally. In fact, I think it typifies adaptation, or sort of the brilliant way that adapting a lot of different styles into one quote unquote shared universe can actually create this brilliant amalgamation, because there have been so many influences on it. It started off as a very strange fiction, creepypasta site, but it's really hard to put a boundary on what SCP is now.
One thing that I think crosses pretty much all boundaries of dialogue that you're writing it is advice. It's basically advice. You don't have to have an absolutely perfect sense of all the characters that you're writing to write good dialogue, but if you have a very good sense of the characters beforehand, you will probably write good dialogue, because the thing about having well-defined characters is they are fragments of your personality. They are in your head. They are loaded into memory. They are things that are in your permanent long-term memory, and they live inside your head to a certain extent because they are fragmentary versions of you, and you should be able to drop them into any situation, and you will know what they would do because you know them like they are either you or someone you are close to. And what that means is, when you start to put them in a situation and go, here's what these 2 people or 3 people or 10 people are talking about, you'll probably already know how they would phrase their comments and responses. So if you want to write dialogue about characters who will be recurring, think about them. Think about where they started, where they're hoping to get to, what their characteristics are, how other people react to them, what their relationships are with each other. If you put that homework in at the beginning, and you use these characters more than once, you actually won't have a whole lot of trouble writing dialogue. I usually find, when I have one of my frequent bouts of horrible writer's block, dialogue is always a thing I can start writing. If I roughly know where the scene is, but I just cannot write a line of prose to save my life. I can't think of a single abstractly intelligent thing to say about the room or the event or the situation. I can still, without even writing quotation marks down, I can bang out a back and forth between 2 characters because they're already talking in there somewhere in my crazy mind. And if you go crazy by installing enough alternate personalities in your brain, which is to say having characters, you should be able to tap into their conversations pretty easily. And it's kind of like magic, where you'll always know what they're going to say ahead of time because they're already saying it.
Yeah, I will say, doing that homework does not really mean, and I've seen a lot of people get lost in this, creating really intense backstories and personal histories.
No.
That can be helpful to know where that person is from, but let me just say, none of my characters have that. There is no, 3-page summary of any of my characters' lives, and I assume probably not yours either, Harry.
There are now, because I'm writing a tale series that makes a big dive into who each of these people are. But as a general rule, no. And I've written 114 or whatever fucking pages without having done that before.
Yeah, because I feel like you get lost in world building and character building as an abstract exercise, and you never really get around to writing the thing.
Right.
And it's better to write something that's awkward and stilted and then revise than always doing the quote-unquote prep.
Right.
Part.
If you know who these people are, and then you write using them for a while and write them in your little stories and continue to use them for a while. When you can get to the point where you have to know why they are who they are, you can come up with that story later as long as it's consistent.
And you do not need to come out of the gate, swinging.
Right.
You don't. The first time you use a character, they do not have to be like a standout, really stylized, memorable thing. They can grow into that. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's a great way to do it.
I think largely that's actually the origin of Ralston's author avatar. Daniel Ashworth just started off as a thread, and now it's, he has like a whole novel written about him.
Yeah,
there was something like he started out as a typo even, which is I know very much on point for Ralston.
Very much, but like
very much. Yeah, I mean, but that's true of all my characters too. Honestly, I mean,
they all started out as typos,
except for yes. But you
should have seen his original draft about Director Viagra of Site 91. It was great.
Common methods.
That's me for the night, folks. I'm just gonna coast from the rest of the.
I mean, most of the listeners won't even know what you're referring to. But yeah, but the only person I knew 100% who they were before I put words to the page was Lucretia.
Yeah.
Everybody else kind of grew into it, and that was because I was like, I've been waiting to write Lucretia since I started the site, basically.
I always had a really good grasp on Dr. Blank. I always knew exactly what he was going to be like.
Huh? Weird.
Yeah.
Surprising.
Weird, eh? Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of typos, let's talk about our subject, which is all about typos.
Yeah.
Kind of.
It comes all out of one typo.
Right. So, which is funny because I didn't know this until recently, and I have this weird blind spot when it comes, and I think it comes from how I discovered the wiki and how very specifically obsessive I've been about the wiki, because I will get into something that's really interesting to me and then I will just focus on that. And then I will hear about other things, like I vaguely knew what SPC was about, punching sharks, but that's it. That's all I knew.
Oh, there's all these weird little community lore moments and things that are hidden in the background that you only vaguely glimpse. You'll hear people talk about chorizo stew, and you're like, "What are you talking about?" And then this gigantic story emerges from it. And you go, "I didn't even know that existed."
my friend, chorizo stew.
Consuelo.
Consuelo.
Anyway.
Yeah. No one. I'm not explaining it. Anyway.
No. Don't. So we'll do an episode on that. So anyway, SPC. SPC,
was a constant, fuck up that people were screwing up SCP.
Special Procedures Containment.
Yeah, and I just didn't know that, and it wasn't until and I don't know how long it was a joke before Jorik wrote his first thing, but back in 2012 he posted a tale that sort of took advantage of that, and just like the way Jorik does to everything, found this brilliant, funny way of like, what would those letters stand for? What's the funniest thing I could? I know, they're the shark punching center.
I think, honestly, I wasn't around for the origin, but like way back when. But I mean, if you look at the original text source for SCP-173 from back on 4chan, the typo's right there in the first line.
Yeah, Flops told me that when she was giving me some of these articles we're going to talk about today, was that there was a typo on the original document, which is pretty great.
Yeah, SPC predates Dr. Clef, it predates Site 17, it predates Maria Jones. It's one of the oldest elements of SPC. It's foundational. It wasn't a pun. Fuck off. It's like whenever I say something as a placeholder. Fucking placeholder. It's not always about you, man.
Yeah, no, totally, because that is just
it's a word
used. Which is why I just say place all the time.
Yes.
But that's also true. I shorten everyone's names if I can possibly do it. I don't know why.
He just calls me Ha.
Ha. It's better than just calling you Blank.
Yeah.
So yeah, Jorik was the first one to kind of come up with this, as far as I understand it. I don't know if it was one of those things where
I think it was, but Jorik was the first one
IRC.
to actually make it funny.
Which, you know,
and it's
unsurprisingly,
really
and it's very funny, yeah. And unsurprisingly, Jorik is, you know, has hands-on the creation of something, you know, central to the SCP wiki.
It only happened like 10 or 11 times.
Right. Like, it's just like every time we come across a subject and it's like, oh, Jorik was like one of the original, if not the original person to come up with this. Yep, I would have expected that. And like, you could be upset or envious, but like it always turns out so good that you're just like, well, no, he's just Santa Claus, but with ideas, I guess.
Yep. And he flies away and you have to play with the ideas by yourself. Just like Santa, it's perfect.
Just like Santa. So, the hub, I think, is pretty great, because the hub, and I know, Lord, you and Flops and Mr. Wrong, or maybe Mr. Pudding, redid the hub a few months back, right?
It was mostly just me, and Flops helped with... Flops helped a lot with the visuals and some of the fact-checking, but... The credit to Mr. Wrong largely comes from the fact that I drew... See, back in, like, 2017, Sir Pudding and I were collaborating on... Like, we're attempting an original hub, but we just never finished it, so I grabbed some of the text from that, and so it only felt right to credit him, especially since the whole thing was originally his idea. Well, not originally, right. But you get what I mean. Like, the modern shape was largely his idea.
Yeah. And we're going to cover that, but basically what Lord's talking about is the fact that there are kind of more than one version of the SBC. They're all about punching sharks. But there was sort of the original jokey sort of thing where, you know, the joke is it's about punching a shark. And then there was the ones where it was a little more layered and it's still mostly a joke. And then there's the more recent stuff, which is in the last few years, you know, and you've been behind some of it quite a bit. And I know Flops a little bit as well. And I will say, obviously, and Sir Pudding as well, my bias will show because it's all about sharkicism. So I'm immediately more interested in the stuff that is got an undercurrent of like Eldritch Horror, but is also kind of about the jokes. So I do find it pretty charming that just like the wiki, it's like, no, this is an alternate version of SCP, like in every sense, like not just in the fact that it's an in-universe alternate, you know, organization, but also the hub looks like the front page of the wiki. And it just has that same, it just feels so, it feels like somebody looking from the outside when they first find the wiki, if they weren't immediately enamored with it, because the first thought would be, I think, to some extent, oh, this is fairly ridiculous. And, you know, SCP is in a lot of ways, and I love it, but I think SPC really, like, takes that and runs with it, and the fact that it was, you know, in 3 different kind of movements is pretty fascinating. But so I just wanted to read this from the hub, which I don't know if you wrote this line, but I think it's fucking great. April 28th, 2022, a decades-long internal investigation has confirmed long-standing suspicions that sharks are still, in fact, super awful. I think
that was probably Pepper's Ghost when they put together the first iteration of the hub. And I'm very grateful that they let me go in and essentially impose all this half-written canon onto the hub itself.
But yeah, I mean, if that line doesn't tell you kind of what you're getting into when you start reading one of these articles, one of the emails later on is going to refer to the fact that it feels like some of the articles are referring to an in-joke that is never explained, and I will say that is 100% true, and I kind of love that.
Oh yeah.
Like, I love that it always feels like when I'm reading one of these. Now I feel like I kind of get them all because we just read a bunch of them. But every time I've looked at one of these, I've kind of been like, I can tell that there's a whole undercurrent here. Like, this isn't just about, haha, isn't it funny to punch a shark? There's, like, a history of laughing at this concept here that's developed over the years. And the fact that it's able to maintain some mystery, like the fact that there's consistent references to SPC-001 being this horrible thing, but, like, no one's really described too much about what that is. I know there's a couple of proposals, but they seem to talk about other stuff.
Yeah, I think the hyperdensity of the world building and the just Byzantine nature of the references to other things, some of which exist, some of which don't exist, and the complexity of the whole thing that's been built around it, and the Eldritch Horror, and the, like, human stakes occasionally, and the actual characters, as far as I'm concerned, that makes the joke so much better that it's built on top of Shark Punching Center. That just, it elevates it completely.
Yeah, there's levels of absurdity here to this that I really appreciate.
Absolutely.
Because that's the kind of humor that I, A, understand how to write, and B, most frequently makes me laugh.
High effort.
Just like, what the fuck did I just read? I mean, it's funny, but also, it's not just a joke. Like, there's so many moments to these articles where it's just like, what? And then, that's a concept that was throwaway, and it's just the one line, and then we're moving on.
Yes, arguably, that sort of thing might be my specialty, if we're being honest.
Yes.
No, absolutely. The Dolphins one is full of that. But I was just like, wow, this is like a whole novel's worth of lore, but it's not a long article, and I feel like you could write like a tale series about it. I mean, I understand why you didn't, but I really appreciate the fact that it's like, wow, this feels like a real world, but a real world that is utterly absurd.
Definitely.
So there's a little bit more from the hub. Like the SCP Foundation itself, the SPC has no one single canon, but rather a series of loosely connected documents. All of them have one thing in common, monomania for punching sharks. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, go wild. Some SPCs are set in the Foundation verse itself, some are set in a full-on alternative universe with a full implied alternative history. And I just wanted to point out that, like, as I said, it's absurdity. So if absurdity is not something that you find funny, these might not be for you. They aren't witty dialogue, not normally. It is more often than not things that people say, even if it's deadly serious within the universe, from the outside, is a wonderful piece of... I wouldn't even call them satire exactly. It's just absurdity. Which is good. So if you like Monty Python, I feel like this is the kind of humor you would like. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, there are traditional joke articles. There's quite a few of them, but there's also... The vast majority are not joke articles. They are articles that happen to be funny in this very specific way. And like I said, there are the later things that you guys have been involved in, sort of weaving this larger narrative, not even a larger narrative, but a larger picture of a world that is really fucked and dark.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also very funny.
Yeah. I would say, like I put on the hub, there are like these 3 almost delineations of SPCs, or axes, I guess, where one is very much that attempt at serious alternate universe world building that's around this horrifically absurd concept. Another axis is just, haha, punching a shark is funny. And actually, it's just like 2 main axes. And like, I would say like, almost all SPC stuff falls between those 2. And like, on the hyper funny end, you have like, I would say, Dave You Fool, who, again, is like very good at comedy. And like, if we're being honest, probably wrote the funniest iterations of just pure, unadulterated shark punching. So,
just even describing this GOI is funny.
And then, like, on that other axis, it's what Mr. Wrong tried to start, I guess, if that makes sense. And, like, everyone else sort of just, I would say, falls in between those 2.
Yeah, I have to say, I think my 2 favorites were your Dolphin one, which is 1258, I think, and 140. Obviously, my bias is showing.
I'm a big fan of 105 myself.
Yeah, 105 was...
105 is one of the most horrifying articles I've ever read. I was very impressed.
Yeah, at first I was like genuinely kind of, weird. I was kind of like, I don't want to be negative, but I don't know if this is working for me. But the further I went into it, the more I was like,
this is just another one of those SPCs where you took an existing SCP and you rewrote it to be about sharks. Oh, geez. Oh, Jesus.
It kind of like what Green Wolf was talking about when he was on, where you just take like the logical, extrapolation and just keep going with it. Like, what is this ability really capable of, and how can we make it like fairly upsetting, and not in a body horror way, but in an existential, like, philosophical way.
Yeah, I'd almost say that the SPC formats that take existing SCPs are almost universally really good at finding a completely different angle to make the SCP funny, amusing, horrifying, or clever in a way that most reimaginings of old SCPs don't do. Which is funny that it's the Shark Punching Center that gets it right.
It's like...
Right, absolutely.
If you really think about it, an SPC is like, what if you... It's like, in its pure form, the kind of SPC that I write, which is like that strain I was just describing those strains before. Like, obviously there's no one way to write an SPC format, but like, this is like my background, what I've specialized in, so for like those reasons, I won't be discussing the other ways to do it. Like, in my view, an SPC format is essentially like a Thaumiel SCP, except the greater purpose is to literally just punch a shark, right? like, sure, you could use it for all these other applications, but like, that monomaniacal obsession is what takes it from... turns it from, like, depressing or horrifying to just funny.
Yes, it's like the Shark Punching Center is the Lex Luthor equivalent of the SCP Foundation. It's like I created a ray gun that can create infinite amounts of high nutrient grain. It's like, are you going to use that to feed the world? No, I'm going to use it to train a gigantic army of aliens, and I'm going to give them a whole bunch of food to make them big and strong so they can kill Superman. It's like,
yes,
man. And the SPC,
that's such a good metaphor.
The SPC is just like that. It's this monomania on this one thing where they could do anything with this, but that 85% of the oceans are full of these horrible shark things, so we gotta get punching.
And
I think my favorite, like, typification of that is 682, where like they ask the lizard to kill sharks by punching. He's like, what? No, that's ridiculous. And then they're just like, well, all right, but we're going to use you to do that, so... And then they just do the most horrible shit. And you're like, wow, do I feel bad for the lizard right now? What the fuck?
Somebody called the Dog Punching Center, am I right?
Oh.
Yeah, I could...
Oh, because you can hear the dog. Yeah, unfortunately, my new place has...
As a dog, it's just dogs running through it. 20 to 40 wild dogs every 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's next door, but the problem is the window won't close because the spring is messed up. So yeah, we're just gonna have dogs in the backyard.
I was gonna say making a joke about punching dogs would lose all the female listeners, but let's be honest here,
it's gonna make you lose all the listeners. I don't like punching dogs.
I've never punched a dog
yet.
I would hope not.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, okay, if a zombie dog from Resident Evil comes at me, I'm gonna punch it.
But those things are vicious, man. They end your game.
Yeah, they suck. Dogs in games are the worst.
So anyways.
Sharkicism is the most important thing I know. No, I don't know.
We're still on the fucking hub. This is an all-time record for not getting to the point. Yeah, we're gonna last
forever. But I will say, because we're not going to break it down too much in the articles, but Sharkicism is so funny to me, especially because you told me, Lord, the other day that like when Sir Pudding first brought it up, there was barely any history of Sharkicism. And it's like, what are you even like parodying? And what's so funny is I think Sir Pudding did some early. No, maybe he didn't. It was Mr. Wrong. Anyway, the idea that Sharkicism is a parody of Sarkicism, and it was like when there was like maybe 3 Sarkic articles. It's so funny to me. Like, it's just, I don't even think it's insulting. Like, Sarkicism is my favorite thing on the wiki, and I think it's the funniest thing ever that they were like, well, hey, what if there were body horror sharks?
The only nuance at that point was like Neo-Sarkics and Proto-Sarkics. So like that is basically what I transplanted over when I did this lore.
Right, yeah.
Personally, I'm a much bigger fan
right.
of the fish that hates.
Oh man, that was a good line. That was a very good line. That was in 1258, right?
Yeah, somewhere in there. It was in Lords, yeah.
I just laughed out loud when I got to that line. So anyway, there's in this universe a version of sarcasm, only they are 100% the bad guys, or at least from the Shark Punching Center's perspective, and they're sharks and like shark human hybrids and like shark body horror creatures. It's so fucking good. Anyway, there's also, some really interesting politics going on here with like the Marianas Treaty, which is a treaty between most of the world and the Sharkic peoples, but not the Shark Punching Center.
Nope.
Fuck that. We gotta punch sharks.
You gotta wonder how the Sharks signed it with fins and how the Punching Center signed it with boxing gloves on.
They have hands, some of them.
I guess I was being, I don't know. What's the word? What's the word for being racist against sharks? It apparently isn't sharkic.
No, sharkist.
Oh, sharkist. Okay.
Sorry.
Nice snort.
My microphone isn't a great sound.
Grand sharkist Harry.
Anyway, so to start us off, I thought we could just read 10:30 a.m., which is a tale by Jorik. It just, I don't know, it's just amazing. So it's a parody, a very short one, a parody on those orientation tales that we've talked about a few times on the podcast.
Yeah, it's great.
So, okay, people, sit your asses down and shut your pie holes. I've got places to go and people more important than you to see, because I happen to be a scientist, and we scientists have a tendency to be very busy and important people. If you're out there in folding chairs, that means you're the new guys, bottom of the totem pole. But it also means that you passed the entrance exams. Welcome to the SPC. From this moment onward, your job is very, very simple. You are going to punch sharks in the face. You will punch sharks. When not punching sharks, you will be planning on punching sharks. You will be developing new ways to punch sharks. You will read about punching sharks. You will write about punching sharks. You will study punching sharks. You will dream about punching sharks. You will jump the shark.
Love that.
You will collect and contain paranormal objects, and then you will use them to beat up sharks. Punching sharks is your life. You may be asking yourself, how am I to punch these sharks? With your fists. You may ask yourself, what if I am bitten by a shark? I am unsure what to do. Go see an alchemist. You may say to yourself, my teeth have become shark-like in the sense that they are all turned into sharks. Good, now start punching them. This is so good. It's an important job, mark my words. There are people out there, many people, who just don't understand why. They don't realize how important our job is. You will be challenged, you will be mocked, you will be insulted, but you cannot lose sight of the goal. Your fist in a shark's face. Several years ago, a former employee asked me, why do we punch sharks? You know what I said to him? Sir, do you hate science? Are you a science-hating shark hugger? Do you approve of the non-science shark agenda? He said no, he wasn't. I punched him in the face anyway. Because he was clearly a closet shark. Because that's what we fucking do at the SBC. When you came in here, there was a copy of Sun Tzu's Art of Punching Sharks on your chair. You are all to have read it by the time you report in tomorrow morning. Now get out of here. These sharks aren't going to punch themselves. Because they don't have hands.
It's just a fantastic proof of my dictum that you always end on the one-liner.
This whole thing is fucking one-liners. It's so fucking good.
There's a dual thing going on here, because on the one hand, it's a really funny explanation of somebody who's really into punching sharks, but on the other hand, it's also clearly coming out of, we've heard people make this fucking typo so much, and I'm gonna pour my irritation of that into the most, I guess this must be what you're talking about, right, guys who just can't stop fucking punching sharks?
I just love the part, though. I mean, you're totally right that there is like a lot of internalized anger going on here, but I just love the part where he's like, I punched him in the face anyway because he was clearly a closet shark, because that's what we fucking do.
That's what gets carried forward out of this, I think, the most out of everything. It's just the intensity of it. There's a very intense aversion to Salatian entities.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, to the point where, like, later on, in the later stuff, they don't even want to say the word shark. We don't say that word.
Yes.
The other thing I think that's really fun, not about this one specifically, but that comes up later on in some of the articles, is the fact that like they are so need to be punching sharks all the time that they maybe are engineering. You know, the fact that, like, I mean, there's even an article, I think SPC 2000, where, you know, the famous article about how we're going to reclaim humanity from an end of the world. Well, what if there were no more sharks to punch? Well, we got to make more sharks. So good.
The punches must
Anyway,
flow.
so... Yes. Mm-hmm. So Jorik also did, you know, the next couple are going to be from him. And it was SCP, not SPC, SCP-1449, which is about an anarchist-created shark, like a pointillism image of a shark that, like, can swim away from the ocean and, like, into people's dreams, or, like, no, I'm sorry, anyone that's going into REM sleep within a certain space of the shark will be plunged into this weird dream world. But basically, this has turned into a way of just talking about the SPC, because while they're doing tests, the agent who is like trying to explore this other world, you know, this dream world, they run into someone who is wearing clothing was heavily worn and patched with leather and shark skin. And he says, "My world has always been the way it is, and we made it like that. We hunt the dreaming, the shark, that's how we see it. We hurt it, killing it in our world, and the dream time poured out like it's spilled blood, and we made this big scar here, and things are wrong. Fish walk, and ghosts haunt the stones, and women give birth to plastic children, and the leech fields stretch out forever in the seas of human blood, and the center eats cocaine and caviar out of panda skull bowls, and the crushed backs of opal mares and acres of broken glass, and it has always been like this." Which is it's such a Jorik thing of like, this is all ridiculous what you're saying, but it also is unsettling.
Oh yeah,
I love how short it is because it's really short. Yeah. It's really short, and because it's really short, it doesn't have time to go, here's what's happening, and here's what's happening is there's this weird fucking shark thing that can make a weird fucking dream world. And because of the SPC being what they are in their universe, they killed the fucking thing. And that was a bad idea. It made everything fucking ridiculous because it all bled out and the dream world stuff just drove everything completely bonkers. And that's not stated overtly, it's just there. Yeah. It's just for you to...
Yeah, I mean, if you read it and you had no concept of the other SPC stuff, you know, it would stand on its own of being like, oh, that was weird, like a dream-like, you know, nightmarish conversation that someone had. But in the greater context of it, it really does serve.
See,
but the thing I like about it the most,
I think one of the interesting things about this particular SCP is that I spoke with Mr. Wrong, like, back in the day, back when we were trying to put together an SPC as a standalone GOI, and I believe on some level this was sort of, kind of, almost his idea of the origin for SPC-001. Like...
Yeah, see, I kind of read this article the same as well, that it is... that the universe of SPC was created by whatever this event was that killed the shark or whatever.
Like, obviously interpretations have changed and drifted in the next few years, but like this is like very much a good retroactive dark origin story for the organization. Like, the reason it exists is because at some point somewhere someone killed the shark and now they have to keep punching the shark forever.
Yep. This universe is their fault. I just love, you know, I put in the notes, but I just, before we move on, I just fucking love that Jorik can't leave well enough alone. That, like, he wrote this funny as shit article to make fun of the fact that people were constantly misspelling SCP, and then, like, he can't even just, like, no, I need to craft a whole world. Let me do it in, like, 1,000 words. And it works well, especially because it is it's sort of, you know, in a lot of ways the way that I use Victim, where the description of the actual anomaly is very brief, and then everything is just sort of like through these logs or tests or whatever, and using the fact that these are dream test, effectively. The dream logic of this conversation really does feel, unsettling. Anyway, so third one by Jorik is It Has Always Been and It Always Has Not Been, which is a direct sequel to this SCP, and it follows on that individual. And it's unclear whether that individual, eventually got to that point, or if this tale takes place after it. But either way, it's that sort of... at first I thought he was an SPC agent, but then the story is very clear that no, he's not. He's sort of like this universal traveler sort of thing. Like, he remembers the fact that the world didn't used to be this way, and it gets kind of dragged into the SPC whatever.
Yeah, but that's just the premise. The real point of it is just the absolutely insane, bonkers description of the universe and the people who live there. The fact that the world used to make sense is almost secondary to the fact that the way it is right now is hilarious and bizarre and weird and vaguely sexy, because it's old SCP, and it always was vaguely sexy.
Yeah, I mean, they're talking about weird fetishes about putting nails into people's brains and stuff.
Yep.
Pretty weird.
It's also almost like an old pulp science fiction thing in that sense, actually, because they go to this other world and there's this weird matriarch lady who is really fixated on sex. It's very much like original, like OG sci-fi.
Totally. And it's got like vague BDSM vibes to it as well, which was a very common thing in those old pulp novels. The thing I think is really funny is that not only, this is like outlandish to like, not a fault, but like it's so far along the scale of, or the spectrum of outlandish, because the center in this version of the universe is just like over the top. They're like, like that little bit of dialogue I just read. They're doing fucking cocaine out of panda skulls. Like, it's just what is happening here. And it's really portrayed pretty well here. I mean, there's that bit where they even say that, and there, towering even over the mountains, was the center, a white cube, kilometers to the side, reaching from the surf to the clouds, windowless, unadorned, monolithic. Even from this distance, it looked too big to be real. Which just like sums up everything about Jorik's like version of the SBC. I feel like it's just like, this is just ridiculous, and we're just going to call it out as such. And I just wanted to read this other part because I thought it was fucking bizarre and amazing. On the wall behind the throne was a bright mosaic of the first punch in capitals. A great white shark struck down and killed by the great fist Harker. The founding of the center in those foggy mythic days, the Dayman fought back first against the Selachian menace. When they dove into the bottomless oceans and met the enemy at their door. When they fought on the beaches and in the tide pools and on the reefs and in the flooded ruins of the ancient cities laid low by the aquatic adversaries. And they succeeded. The center was founded and the threat was driven back beneath the waves where it belonged.
Love just the casual plagiarism of Churchill there, just for the ultimate, like... Here's how ridiculous these people are.
Also, it fits thematically because these are people that are so afraid of entities that are not like them.
Yeah.
And Churchill was a giant racist, so.
Yeah. It's true.
Anyway. Lord, why don't you tell us a little bit? I know you didn't write this, but wrong, but SPC 2615.
So yeah, this was very much the first SPC format to actually adopt the format. Yeah,
that's
and it's like very much like a product of its time. Because it is essentially describing a fairy, right? Only this fairy has been heavily modified, surgically modified and mutilated so that it creates hallucinations of sharks.
And what is the center?
And what the center does is that they essentially just throw trainees at them. Throw trainees at this fairy. And the trainees hallucinate these terrifying sharks, and that breathe fire, and that poof out of every reflection. And that motivates people to keep punching the sharks.
I just love from like the first GOI document on until it just as much as it is making fun of this typo and the absurdity of it, it's also consistently mocking the concept of the SCP with the foundation within the universe, because they like take that ridiculousness of we're cold, not cruel, we're willing to do things that ends justify the means, and then just takes that and then just like injects adrenaline straight into their heart.
Yeah, I mean, just changing the end to punching sharks open-ended is, and
like also moving the goalpost as to like what's over the line. Nothing.
Exactly.
As long as you're punching sharks. But let's see, what else was it? Oh yeah, this is the first time I think that we see where the agents won't even say that. Like in a dialogue, there's a bit where they're like, "Well, shark," and he's like, "No, we don't say that. Salacian." Oh. They're so like philosophically opposed to the idea of sharks, they won't say the fucking word.
Which is great, of course. The name still being the Shark Punching Center.
That's right. No, they're the Salacian Pugilism Center.
I don't think we ever established what the acronym for this iteration of it stands for. Funnily enough.
Right. Yeah, I know. I'm just making a joke. But yeah, I mean, that one's great. I think it perfectly kind of showcases the fact that like anything that is gonna help the center kill sharks by punching them, then it's going to be a good thing, and they will do it. So if it means like a horrible like crime against humanity or crime against fairydom or whatever, then they're going to do it. It doesn't matter. All that matters is you're going to kill some sharks by punching. Hey there, fans of Simply Creative People. We're mostly unsponsored so far, so I figured I would take the time to mention that you can support the show on the show page at anchor.fm/simplycreativepeople, or if you're so inclined, you can check out Harry or my Ko-Fi pages at ko-fi.com/harryblink or /Grigory author. Things are crazy tough out there, so if you can't afford any financial support, and trust me, we understand, do us a favor and mention the podcast to someone who might enjoy it, or spread the word online. If we want to bridge the gap between fans and creators, we've got to get the word out to new fans. In many ways, this show is designed to be appealing to new and old fans of SCP alike, as we can all enjoy some discussion about this thing we love, and we can all learn something new. Heaven knows I learn something new every week. Thanks so much, and we love you just for listening. Thanks for the support through all these first few months of the podcast. You're the best. SPC 140 by Sir Pudding is kind of a bit like pulls on the brakes a little bit to the absurdism. It's still very absurd, but it's just enough grounded in reality, and it's just enough dry humor, dark dry humor, I would say.
Why would there be dry humor in a shark punching scene? Surely it should be wet humor.
Well, yeah. I mean, and I think that this like really is some of the most fun way to do absurdism. Is it's really written. There's almost no winking at the audience,
right?
But then you look at that brilliant illustration right at the top by Scorpion451 that looks amazing, but also is fucking ridiculous. It's like a human shark octopus hybrid thing. It's a nightmare, but it's also like laughably a nightmare. And I just love the fact that they're like, we've kept it over. Like, okay, well, they have shark eggs. Okay, well, the shark eggs are a problem. Well, then, if shark eggs are a problem, you want to kill them, what should you do? I know, we should, like, adopt some Davite technology. It's just, like, the fact that there are shark eggs and shark eggs, but, like, it's still just the device. But this is a scroll that, like, describes, or a book, or whatever, written by Deva philosophers about ancient techniques about how to punch sharks. And it's very clear this is sort of like, I don't know if it's directly the origins of the center, but it seems like this is their like the start of almost all their martial arts stuff, because it's not like you could just punch a shark in a normal sense and have it work. There's got to be some weird otherworldly mystic martial arts bullshit going on. I mean, I don't know if you ever tried to punch something underwater. It doesn't work out.
I saw a cartoon once where Mr. T punched a shark, and I don't think he did anything special. I think he just punched the shark.
That's Mr. T, though. I mean, he pities a fool. So.
Yeah, well done.
You're welcome. So this is Sharksism, because they developed as a slave revolt in Aditum, but Aditum is now kind of Atlantis because it's a drowned city, and they worship SBC-001, although it's never quite explained what that is, and in later articles it isn't really either.
It's kind of a joke.
They
really.
also, yeah. No, but I sort of love that it's just as mysterious as the actual Sarkic stuff.
Yeah,
Dave Uthul did that. But
Dave Uthul did that too with Korbanek. The reason that the second Earth got sent into space is because they were saving us from SCP-001, whatever the fuck that was.
That's fucking right. Yeah. I mean, it plays off the whole idea that we're not supposed to know exactly what SCP-001 is, right? That's why there's so many of them. Right. But I really, the human... I mean, first of all, just the idea that they're human shark hybrids. The Sharkics are not just bad sharks. No, they're weird body horror human shark people. But there's also, bio-augmentation, like Sarkics in the mainline stuff, with weird tentacles and stuff, but it's all, ocean, marine biology-related stuff. It's just utterly ridiculous. And the scroll focuses on their vulnerability to Silatian pugilism and their continued development as the war progressed of increased sophisticated Silatian pugnatorial? I don't know if that's a word. Capabilities, and like our SCP-140, it will expand to when exposed to the Cyan Abyss, which are the entities, the deviant, quote-unquote, entities from the Sharkics, their hides and their ink. So it's still fed by blood. It's still SCP-140, but it's shark blood and skin. And the extension of the... Sometimes will include, more techniques, but oftentimes will show, just like our SCP-140, that, actually, this society lasted longer and fought the Sharkics for longer. And then the best part is, as opposed to the way that the Foundation handles their 140, this is, this is how much ink you need from a dead Sharkic. So it's very clearly an instruction manual. This is how many, and the best way to get it is if you punch it directly beneath the thoracic gills, roughly where the lungs would be located in a human torso. See the Manual of Silatian Pugilism, section 3.13.3.
And while you're seeing it, give it some blood.
Just so much, listen, every time this book expands, we get a little bit, we know a little bit more, so we should expand it more. Let's get more blood.
Mm-hmm.
And also by Sir Pudding, which is also an incredible one, is 682, which this is just 682. My favorite part about this is it's not a different SCP. It is literally, they go, in its original form, and the hot link literally goes to the actual document of SCP, 682. So it's the big fucking lizard, the one that's hard to destroy, the one. And I just love how they have, I thought the first interview log was going to mimic the interview log, the famous one from SCP-682, and instead it just becomes 682, who is a fairly ridiculous, I mean, it's a classic, but is a fairly ridiculous character, both as portrayed and then how it's been extrapolated on the site, being made to laugh at SBC. Even it has limits as to how much you want me to kill sharks by punching them. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna do that, it's ridiculous. I can't. There are lines I won't cross, even as the hard to destroy reptile.
It's just too stupid. He's too angry to do something that stupid.
And so they just start doing horrible things to him, and anything they can do to stop or start arresting his healing, so that they can help him adapt to becoming a good test subject for punching techniques, to the point where they submerge him in seawater until he just adapts to breathing water like gills, so he becomes enough like a Slacian entity that now it is much more useful as a test subject.
Yeah, he becomes the shark punching bag.
That's right. And then by the end they break him. Like, the best part is they break him, and he's just like, listen, I will punch sharks. And they're like, too late! We offered you that deal. You're much more useful to us as a test subject.
One of these days, I'm going to have to write SPC 6820.
Oh, God.
Oh, my God.
You are too, aren't you?
One of these days.
It has to be you. It has to be you. You wrote SPC 6500, as we'll see, so it pretty much needs to be you.
Yeah. That's like one of those things where, like, someone just, I was playing around with the idea of, like, whose victim could cross over with, because we did a data one a few months ago with it. And somebody was like, well, like, Corbinick. And it was like, oh my God, of course.
Yep.
Now I must write this. Anyway, so next one we're going to talk about is yours. So why don't you just give us the elevator pitch about 1250?
Yes.
1258.
Yes, describe this one briefly, because it's fairly simple and not at all complex.
Well,
what is the anomaly first that is being taken?
There's better be an elevator in, like, New York City.
No, so
time for the pitch.
What the anomaly itself was. So SCP-1258 is actually just this martial art that is literally just this martial art that when animals see it, they become intelligent, like human level intelligence, and start getting really rebellious against other humans, against the humans that showed them the martial art. So it is very much like just a direct.
I mean, in a good
it's
way.
very much just like directly porting it over into the SPC context, right? And then, just building on the implication, because like.
Yeah, I mean, so they use it on who? Who is the foundation or the center?
They use it on some bottlenose dolphins, some blue whales, and some like small, like vaquita, like tiny small whales. And like the whole idea is like, well, obviously, if you have a martial art, if you have a martial art that you can teach to animals, obviously you're going to teach it to, like, cetaceans, right? Because, like, they are just naturally... Cetacean. I don't know how to say words sometimes. Like, they naturally just go through the water and, like...
And hate sharks, right? Bottlenose dolphins hate sharks. In reality, yes.
So, anyways, the natural extension of what happens, of course, is that the martial art also just, it's one, it makes animals rebellious. Two, it can be like transmitted. So naturally, what happens is they deploy these dolphins and whales to do a field mission. They promptly rebel. And one thing leads to another, and there is now a rival superpower to the Sharkics in the world's oceans.
Yeah, I love that the idea that like just start it, because if one of these dolphins is doing the martial art and a whale sees it, then that whale will then also be able to do it. And the best part about this is if they see them, then they grow arms.
Yeah.
Because otherwise how could they punch sharks if they couldn't grow arms? So there are all these fucking dolphins and whales with arms. And I just imagine big muscly arms too, like, huge ones.
Beefy.
And I think the most fun thing is that, like, you could have taken it in a way in which, and you start going down this way of, like, the first thing they're going to do is, like, fuck with the whaling industry and just, like, how much humanity is fucked over, marine biology, mammals, especially, and how, the common understanding of it is how we shouldn't be fucking with them and whatever. But then you just, like, take that left turn, all the way back to the point where, like, the dolphins are like, no, man, You know what's the worst? We gotta join back up. We want to fucking kill the sharks.
Yep.
And then also there's a part where the dolphin hits on the doctor.
No comment.
And that's just how you know it was written. That's how you know it was written by Lord.
I mean, I had a Bigfoot hit on a documentarian, so it's okay.
Yeah, I have not, to my knowledge, I have not yet written an animal hitting on a human being.
I mean, Bigfoot, they're not animals. Calm down.
Oh my
Don't
god,
be such a racist.
what's the word for being racist against Bigfoot? Because I guess I'm that too now.
Racist. I think it's just racist.
Yeah, it might just be that.
I see.
I'm sorry to our Bigfoot.
I'm not.
Jeez. They could be big fans. I don't know.
They could be big fans because
they're big feet. Anyway, yeah, I really like that one.
It's great.
It's hilarious. It's got a dense world building, just like Sir Pudding's one, but it also just I love that it goes into this direction where you're like, wow, this is getting so expansive, and then like comes back to the ridiculous at the end in a really you really like make that landing. You stick it really well.
Oh well, I mean it does one thing that most of the SPC formats do, but it does it so much that it almost becomes its own unique running joke. They've always got these in the SPC formats, they've always got these epithets for important objects or events or programs or devices. They're always in all caps, and they always then immediately explain to you what this ridiculous code word refers to anyway. And there's like 73 of them in this article.
Whoops.
You throw them all in there, they're all over the place. It's funny. It's part of... It's amazing to me that, in a sense, the SPC formats are more clinical versions of the SCP formats. They are even more deeper in their own terminology, which just really adds to the joke, really.
No, it does.
You're Case Liquid White and Cerulean Glove and Cyan Abyss and Midnight Girdle.
Midnight Girdle. Yeah, ridiculous.
It's beautiful.
All right.
It's kind of like a takeoff on the GOC with their code names, but it just takes it up to 11, as everything is with the SPC.
Yeah, in retrospect, this very much owes itself to Sir Pudding and his background, but like this like really ratchets it up to like absurdity.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I will say that like, as much as I was really, I really did like 140. It felt not self-contained, but it felt like a really nice play on 140. Obviously the real one. But this one, as much as it is, I understand, adapting an actual mainless ACP. This is really good world building too.
Thank you.
Like, yeah, I mean, genuinely. I mean, like,
Absolutely.
just the idea that, like, okay, we've got an evil undersea civilization. What if we had an ally? So, like, it's just, yeah, of course. Like, it just made perfect sense. Yeah, we've got friendly groups. Why not another one?
It's beautiful.
Anyway. So, next one was by Lieutenant Flops, and she bade me to mention the fact that this SPC 507 is the crossover with Team Bird. The Center pilfers several Sharks' manuscripts during the 7th Deviant Crusade, and inside these documents found references to Red Nether, entities as angels and acolytes. During field incidents, however, Center pugilists have consistently gone on record to describe these entities as demonic, passive-aggressive, and even sassy. I just like how it starts really, really bad and then just gets progressively less bad with that list. This is all about a metaphorical Eldritch Horror, and they're sharks, obviously, but there are the Red Nethers, which are these spectral, Eldritch Horror, like space sharks, effectively, that happen in other universes, like alternate universes to the SPC main line, or baseline, excuse me. And then there's the White Nether, which is this all-consuming, Eldritch god of sharkdom that is like going from universe to universe. Essentially, it's, the Cthulhu, or whatever. And my favorite thing is, first of all, this is just a series of ridiculous military actions by a Marine fighting team, which is their MTFs or MFTs, etc. But that she took your anomaly, the 1258, and then applied it to a whale, which is like 45 meters in length and like I don't even know how many tons. Also retrofit with ramjet sphincters so it can fly in atmosphere and space, and it has internal cargo space so that it can hold like an MFT, and also like has internal oxygen. Like it's just like this cybernetic organism of a whale that's turned into a spaceship. It's just, first of all, it's got to be pretty gross to ride around in.
So they can go have team adventures flying around in space, punching space sharks that are too sassy.
It's so good.
Astonishing. It's such a good article. It's over the top even for SPC.
Oh my god, yeah. Like just a whole it's
really funny.
It's like the transformation from like pulp comics from the 30s to like the Jack Kirby stuff. Yes. Where like all of a sudden you had people riding around on skis and embodying their physical embodiments of death. Like it's just
very
like,
Jack Kirby for sure, yeah.
What's happening? Like and they have like words or like terms for their different like procedures of punching, whatever, move, let's do this one. Oh, that one's only for if you feel really desperate. It's like calling out the attack before you do it, like in Dragon Ball Z or something.
Yep.
And as Flops, bade me to mention, this is the crossover with Team Bird. I won't say how, because if you know about Team Bird, then you will understand. And even if you don't, this is an article that is fucking wonderful. It's very fun.
I forget, was Team Bird for the DoomCon contest?
No, according to Flops, they did SPC for Doom.
Another group.
I'm sure Team Bird was for a con. I just can't remember which one.
Yeah, and I don't want to explain it because I think we'll do a Team Bird.
That's fair. I just thought it's also worth mentioning, I guess. Pepper's Ghost's team for DoomCon, which was also SPC, and
I think they were on the same.
No, they weren't.
I don't know.
Like the scenario there was essentially, what if all the sharks did disappear?
Oh, right. That's when SPC 2000.
Yeah. And I do think. No, I think SPC 2000 was something different and before, but. That's when Peppers put together his SPC 001 proposal. It deviates a little from Mr. Wrong's original vision, but not necessarily in a bad way, because essentially the only thing, like, it is one of those things that I think it's fitting. It's very much fitting as like an SPC 001. Although, I think I can talk more on that. Actually, I feel like I can talk more about that later when we get to SPC 6500, honestly.
Okay. Well, Harry, you wrote a nice comment on SPC 105, which is Lords. You want to, what, without spoiling it, what's that about?
Did I?
You did.
Yeah. I'm just saying, and you liked it. You already said you liked it, but the point is I'm talking too much, so you talk.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I did write this. I've said, and this is actually so we're transitioning to SPC 105 here. I said, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, there's no irony involved at all, despite the way I am unable to speak without waves of irony proceeding out of my vocal cords directly into your ears. The way this charming, upbeat thing swerves into what it swerves into is just fabulous. I'm afraid to leave my house now. That's the excuse I'm using. And it is. Wait, is it rated 40? Man, fuck all of you. Fuck all
and it wasn't,
of you.
It wasn't 40 until I just read it while we were prepping for this.
What the hell are you idiots doing with your spare time? Read this. It's great.
Well, it's an SPC. They're always rated a little lower than SCPs proper.
It's not fair.
Anything that's not a mainless SCP is gonna have a harder time getting ratings.
Yeah. So this is SCP-105. Iris Thompson, the girl with the camera that she can take pictures with, and then stick her hand into the pictures and manipulate the real world locations. And it's just, you know,
I don't want to insult anybody, but I always thought that was kind of a lame anomaly.
I like that. That was a good one. Yeah, you thought 179 was lame because she just points. You're weird.
I didn't say it was bad because she just
don't make me get the tapes.
I said that I would want more.
The thing, I feel like, when it comes to 105, one of the things about just her as, like, an SCP and as a character is that, like, literally everyone has a take on her, almost. Because, like, she's one of those early prototypical SCPs, but unlike, say, Kane or Abel or 343, she's also a girl. And as we all know, the SCP fanbase skews younger and skews teenage and male, so...
Yep. What? Crazy.
Yeah. Now, the author base is a different story, but the reader base and the fan base, well...
Yes. On pretty much every metric, the author base and the fan base have very little to do with each other the place where we meet, which is on the website.
Yeah.
I mean, that's true of almost everything, though.
And like, this podcast is trying to remedy that, too. But...
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a problem. The thing that I would like to say, and this is a perfect example of it, yet again, is that the podcast is not just about talking about these things. It's why we hold back on many of the best, like, you know, plot twists and jokes, or because, you know, we're trying to curate. We're trying to, like, get people to go, don't just listen to a podcast or watch a video about an SCP. Go to the website, make an account. If you like a story, upvote it, or just leave a comment, or send us a message. You know, like, there's so many of the fan sites. I'm sorry, the site fans are people that don't actually engage with the authors, and trust me, all authors want to hear
100%.
Desperately.
Yes, please. Nicely, please. Anyway.
So...
no, come at me. Come at me. Fucking try me. I have nothing to lose.
So, but with SPC-105, I guess, this is, like, very much almost a response to how... Like, not a response necessarily, but, like, a synthesis of how the character is almost treated in, like, the resurrection storyline, right? Because there she's, bluntly put, vulnerable. And part of that is, like, as a natural extension of how her character was treated back in the original storylines. So, my thought process when going into this is, like, what if she was in control of her own destiny from the beginning? And also in this absurd world where the greatest good is to punch a shark.
Yes. Objectively.
Yes. And that's like the through line that just led me through this entire piece.
I like the part where she, on 2 separate occasions during this speech, brags about punching a diplomat while, like, he was giving a speech from the Shark Ignatian, like, from, like, 100 feet away, through a camera.
Because it's like, well, you can stick... It is actually... It almost should have been the first old article that became an SPC, because she sticks her hand in photographs to do stuff on the other end of the photograph. How SPC can you get?
I'm honestly surprised it took me so long to write this, but...
It makes so much sense. Of course it's an SPC. It does.
But, like... It's also, like, format screw of like, the SPC format, which is, like, already very loose.
Sure.
So...
It's true. Yeah, because it's like a speech. She's getting a big award, and she's making the speech, and she continues to refer back to her actual original document because she is, a Thaumiel class SCP only. That doesn't exist that way in this world. So how could you in some way utilize her powers, not just through a camera, but through images that she quote unquote owns? And
the twist
going
is just
through
like,
her CV.
Lord.
Oh yeah,
Go on, yeah.
Oh Lord.
I'm not even gonna say it. This is gonna be my version of Grigori's. I want you to read it because it goes from really on point characterization of Iris. It's a really good. She's got a good voice, and there's a good story, and it carries through what her life is like in this universe. But then it carries the idea to its logical conclusion and goes, okay, if they didn't care about all this compartmentalization and locking people away and not trusting people, if all they cared about was punching sharks and they had Iris, what would she be up to? And you carried the idea all the way, and it's a terrifying conclusion that I find just absolutely hilarious and amazing and awful at the same time. It's really
it's like I said earlier, you turned a cute thing into this, philosophical nightmare.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to give it away either. So there's an aspect of this that is like not typical horror. It's one of those things where you sit and think about it and go, oh.
Yeah, that would suck.
See, you're just raising the expectations for this piece so high that when the listeners if the listeners go to actually read it, they're going to inevitably be just a little disappointed.
Ignore his self-deprecation. It's a good article.
It is.
All right, now let's talk about your greatest
yes.
SPC contribution.
It's the single greatest SPC article.
I'm not biased at all.
Nope, not even a little bit.
SPC.
SPC 6500. Infinitesimal.
I wonder what this is a reference to.
I don't know. What is the reference to?
It's a reference to the song Infinitesimal by Mother, obviously.
All right.
If you say so.
Well, we're only on like series 2 or 3 at this point, right? So there's no SCP 6500.
Certainly not. No.
I've been looking online. As far as I can tell, they stopped making SCPs in 2012 or so.
Some people would wish that we didn't make it.
Anyways.
But anyway.
No more jokes. Okay.
I will say genuinely though, and like I even wrote it to the outline so I didn't forget. You were the 10th article so that we were able to make a canon.
For no return.
And you did it in a hilarious way that perfectly mocks in a respectful way, but perfectly mocks our big ass thing. And I just want to say, thank you, and what a good fucking
You're
job.
welcome.
I'm still so happy with it.
You're welcome.
And I didn't even have anything to do with it. You just showed up. What if I did this? Oh, that sounds funny. And then you had a thing, and it was like, oh wow, you did a good job at this.
Now, for me, this is the ultimate Lord experience. It's shit posts directly at you using your stuff, and then you compliment him for it because of how good it is.
And then he goes,
very nearly mocks you, and you have to be like, you did a really good job on that, god damn it.
I mean, my favorite part is that it's like, it looks on its surface like it's going to be just as long, drawn out as 6500, everything that people were like worried about. Hey, whatever. It's 95,000 words. You can't oversell that. But it's just so wonderfully brief and hilarious, in this way that is poking fun at us, but also is canonical because it does show the fact that the impasse is universal, and it was just this is the perfect way to cap off the first 10 articles that we need to say we're a canon.
Yep. And that's also Lord's specialty is the indispensable shitpost. The shitpost that you can't ignore. You gotta have it.
I don't know. I ignored that. We are a society.
Well, it was clown pictures. I think you were fully justified.
Yeah, I'm not a big clown guy.
Yeah,
so, okay, you did mention earlier that, just a little bit ago, that you thought that there was a connection between this and the 001?
So, Pepper's Ghost Proposal is, it's like, the pitch essentially is, his proposal is essentially like an enhancement, right, for strength. But the meat of it is basically what would happen if the sharks vanished. And it's
I can't tell if you're doing a bit right now with the big long pause.
No, I'm not. I'm just.
He heard that you do a lot of editing, and he thought it would be funny.
No, man, I work more than 40 or 50 hours now.
Oh my God.
There's not going to be shit.
Oh,
but it's
no.
okay.
It's not...
But it's okay, because you could leave these huge pauses in now, because now we've made jokes about them.
Yeah, fucking A.
But yeah, so, like, essentially it's sort of, like, I sort of dance around the conclusion.
You sure do.
Okay, yes, I do. But it dances around the conclusion of Pepper's ghost proposal, in that...
Oh, sure.
If,
okay.
like, basically, if there is no punching, there is no reason for the Shark Punching Center. If there is no shark, there is no reason for the Shark Punching Center to exist. You know?
Sure.
And, like,
yeah.
Pepper's ghost proposal already sort of said this in a different way, but, like, I just sort of go the other way. Like, it's a fork in the road, right? Either, if the sharks vanish, they destroy themselves in a nihilistic blaze, and then there are no more stories to tell about them. And that's, like, sort of the doom-con about the Shark Punching Center. But if there are still sharks, well then... This is also sort of like something Flops touched on in some of her other works, where ultimately, like... And I feel like some of her Shark Punching Center works that she wrote in the days when SPC was becoming like this overdone, wrung out, like, flat, haha, it's just about punching sharks joke sort of thing, where it's like, she has this piece that's an SCP about dreams people have about punching sharks, and where essentially they're like messages from the SPC being, please don't forget about us, so long we were funny once.
God, she's so
yeah, good. And that's like I don't directly reference it in this SPC 6500, but it was like sort of like an influence in the background, like just something I was just.
It's very fitting too, because I mean the core concept to 6500, the one that we wrote, is in the same vein, right? It's what does the Foundation do when they're faced with the end of the anomalous? Do they sit on their hands, or do they do something about it? And it just, knowing the history now behind it, it even makes it more like wonderful that like this amalgamation of both, a parody of 6500, but also like the larger overarching like history of SPC on the wiki. It's really good.
Yeah, very much.
It's also underrated. I am not happy with the fact that it's not even at 100. Let's go.
We'll get there eventually. It's like, this is like very much this sort of thing where like the SPC, like the Foundation there are like tons of stories you can tell with the Foundation, and like 6500, the SCP, of course, is a testament to that. There's like, you cover like what? 10?
Everything.
Yeah, like 10 different genres over 95k words, and it's like...
There's a lot of different things. Yeah.
But for the SPC, there's always kind of only sort of been that one story. And it's told in slightly different ways, and told in more absurd and less absurd ways, and with various tangents. But at the end of the day, it's always about punching sharks and the consequences.
The punchline is so fucking good to this. I can't. Punchline. But like the brilliant, the way that you subvert the roles that we were trying to play with the stereotypical fantasy characters and the paths in the first half of 6500, and the way that you play with that to get to the punchline is so fucking good in this.
Yeah, you had to do beyond high effort shitpost to shitpost 6500, and I mean, it took 7 of us, and you did this.
Now,
so that's pretty incredible.
To be fair, this is kind of a short form, which is like a meta layer to the shitpost.
Yeah, it's short form, but the visual flair you picked up big time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because it doesn't look exactly like 6500.
And since most people can't read 6500 because it's too long, they only ever see the visual flair anyway, so it's like a 1-1 comparison as far as they're concerned.
You guys can, though. You can read it. You can read it. Anyway. All right. Enough blowing smoke up your ass. All right, so let's read some emails and get the fuck out of here.
Yes.
All right, so Lord, why don't you take this first one from Boris?
Did you even put them in the outline? I didn't see them.
You did not put them in the outline.
I emailed.
Oh, they're okay. The updated.
Hours ago.
Oh, right. I see it.
Check your email.
Hello. I can't wait to hear you try and convince me SPC is a legit, serious GOI.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm not sure anyone actually believes that. Me, least of all. Probably because they brought on Apocalypse in Team Bird. The Polish wiki used to translate it as...
I'm not even gonna
try. I'm sorry. I'm not.
Something in Polish.
Yeah, still was any...
There's a lot of...
Yeah, I can't try. I can't do this. Concrete Producers Association. Back when it was just a name without any lore. It's probably their front company or something. Am I correct in thinking it's the only GOI that sprung entirely from a meme? Do you think something like that would even be possible now? Cheers.
I don't know if it's the only one, but I do think it must be one of the few.
It probably is one of the few.
I will say that unconsciously, I have tried to make Victim a sort of like this. It's not the same, but like it has always been this like meta layer thing.
Yeah.
I
wish I knew more about SPC beforehand, but anyway.
As for the second question, do you think something like this could even be possible now?
Yeah, Consuelo GOI.
I have been advised not to say the words fish and the word council in directly next to each other.
Well, it was really good of you to not break that advice.
Yeah, but I'm allowed to say fishing council, and I think that counts as spring from a meme.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just
double
like
layers.
One guy. That's really just like one guy with a plan. Shout out to Dodo Devil. One guy, yeah. So with a plan and a vision and a burning desire to tell stories about
Dodo
fishing.
is incredible.
Yes.
Dodo is incredible at art and at writing, and it's just just fucking so good.
Didn't Dodo do a collage art for SPC 6500? I have a vague memory.
He did,
of that.
yes.
SPC
yes.
or SCP?
Both.
Well, I know he did one for SCP, Gregory, because I did the license box, but he did one for SPC as well.
He did. I think I link it on
I'm
my
not waiting on your
page.
confirmation, Gregory. The author says that he did.
I'm not saying anything. I'm letting you talk.
Yeah. I think it's...
That's I didn't recognize.
Yeah, I think I link it on my author page, actually.
It's really great.
It is.
Because he did one for Gregori's Path in 6500, so he did one for the SPC as well, because Dodo is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, during the contest, Dodo was bringing out these collages on some of the main ones, which led us to say, hey, do you want to put one in the official SCP-6500? And then he got the thing he made for 6500 is just fucking great. I can't even talk about how great it is. It's so good. All right. Harry, you want to read this next one?
Sure. This is again from my favorite thing to say out loud, Real Sir. Can't tell whether I'm pleased or disappointed to learn after last week's episode that my worry of the serpent's hand, that I might be missing some details on the hand that I should have picked up on, was misplaced. Shout out for giving me a sentence that only I could have read out loud there, by the way.
Yeah.
That they really are that perpetually mysterious. But this week's topic is one I know I don't understand. Every time I've come across an SPC-related piece, it's felt like some massive inside joke that I wasn't in on. I don't really have much in the way of specific questions about them, except for maybe all of the questions, so I'm just gonna wait and see what comes up. I will ask, more broadly though, do y'all think that most GOIs are intended from the beginning by their authors, creators, or that it's more common to be a more unplanned and organic outgrowth of originally one-off elements and stories? Maybe even for most of them, I honestly could imagine either kind of origin for.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty even split, honestly.
Honestly,
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like there's this thing where they're originally intended as one-offs by their original creators, like for several, but then the person who goes and turns them into a proper GOI just isn't the original creator. Like, that's the case.
Yeah, that has frequently happened. Where, I mean, certainly that's what happened with the Deva.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, almost nobody has contributed more than one article to the Deva. A few people have. Stormbreath has. But, and I guess myself too. But it's pretty commonly like that, where it is like kind of a hodgepodge of people saying, oh, this is interesting, I wonder what I could do with it. And then, you know, after a couple years or after 6 months, depending on how popular it is, hey, somebody else comes along and goes, you know, this qualifies as a GUI now, we should make a page for it.
And like, this is the case for Broken God, at least, Wandsman.
Oh, sure.
Even, I don't know if Sarkis is
no, Wandsman was intentional. I talked to the creator. Sorry, I don't actually know. So was intentionally making it a GOI from the beginning.
Metaphysician?
No, you're talking... No meta...
wait, you talking about the GOI Wandsman? Or are you talking about...
The Wandsman was created by Metaphysician, but Wandsmen were created by Chaucer. We're splitting hairs.
Yes, this is... Well, that's like...
Oh, I thought we were talking about GOIs.
I mean, I feel like that's like the plain... That's like the clearest example of drawing inspiration from
I
guess.
guess.
Yeah, it's true.
I sort of...
Yeah, the one author created the element that led into it, and then the other author picked it up and made it into a group of interest. It's true. You're right.
No comment.
But yes, it's very much a collaborative effort, and sometimes it just takes like an extra pair of hands to do some of the shoe polishing.
Nice.
Speaking of somebody who made a GOI from scratch, it still required quite a bit of collaboration. Like, even the ones that didn't have collaborators on its specific articles, if it wasn't for Harry and Plague PJP, you know, looking at everything I was doing and kind of giving me feedback to it, none of this would have happened with Victim. So even the ones that are intended from the beginning to be a GOI, although it wasn't from the beginning, it was more a reaction to that first article.
Yeah, GOIs in my experience are a little bit of collaboration and a lot of cajoling. Like, hey, you want to write one of these, right? You know you want... Boy, that would be a really good example. Why don't you write that as your VKTM article?
Yeah, and it worked for a while. Yeah, we've gotten a few different takes on it, which is really fun.
Definitely.
And I can't believe everyone has kind of followed my one rule.
Don't explain it.
Don't explain shit. Don't give me some deep lore or I will disavow you. Anyway, but I do think that most of them, especially the classic ones, were more organic. Obviously Sarcasm is another kind of exception because I don't know if Meta set out to do a GOI, quote unquote, but that's certainly that was basically entirely from Meta.
See, I don't know, because like when it comes to even stuff like Prometheus Labs and the Global Occult Coalition, like the modern conception of them, at least among on-wiki fans, is like very different from how they were originally written. And like those two examples owe a lot to Greenwolf again. But and I do specify on wiki fans because in many corners of the internet the GOC are still the kill guys.
Yeah, see, the way it is, I think, in my mind, which I'm just going to pretend is somehow imposable on all of your minds, is that in each era of writing these things, there is usually one or two, at most, I think, active voices pushing each individual group of interest, and then they give way to somebody else, because before Greenwolf, Clef was doing basically all of the GOC stuff, and Clef is gone. So there's usually some fairly strong voice pushing them in a certain direction while everybody else is writing about them, and they pass that on to somebody else. So it varies.
I will say, my opinion is that the Greenwolf stuff with GOC owes a lot to the Clef stuff. It doesn't feel like a huge departure in a philosophical way.
It evolves.
It feels like an evolution out of it. Whereas there are other examples where it's like, wow, that's wildly different. The Church of the Broken God, which you brought up earlier. I mean, you look at the earliest stuff, and it's nothing to do with some of the lore that happened later on. Which, collaboration, that's why this shit's fascinating, especially from the outside. Anyway, okay, I'll read this next one. Hey, it's Crocat here. SPC is one of my favorite GOIs, so I'm eager to hear this next episode. I hope you guys talked about articles that portray a more serious center, because I love those so much.
Guess what? We did.
Also, interesting thing from the Japanese branch, SPC 1824-JP, are deep-sea crabs infused with fighting spirit, and the center sends them out into parts of the ocean that a normal punch agent would otherwise have trouble operating in. These crabs have a compulsion to punch sharks, so the center obviously really likes them, but they also have a compulsion to punch crocodiles. This is because crabs are a part of their own SPC, the scissors punching crocodiles. After all, there are many similarities between sharks and crocodiles. Sharp teeth, rough skin, evil. Sharks do not have rough skin.
Are you saying that sharks are smooth, or...?
Yeah. They have lovely skin. That's why you take their skin and turn it into stuff.
Let's not generalize all sharks. Don't be sharkist.
Anyways, I should request... It's a pity they don't translate more of the international SPC stuff, honestly. Like, I guess it's just not enough translation requests going in, but like, I don't know. I'm like...
Well, there's only so many people that are willing or capable to do translations as well.
Yeah, and they only do 500 or 600 a day.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, I am like Harry. Sometimes I'm sort of like a lore maximalist almost. Like, if it exists, I want to try and incorporate it. So like,
yeah.
I guess apologies over to our friends, to our fellow Japanese-speaking SCP authors, SPC authors, because
pugilists.
Yes, I would incorporate this stuff into my stuff if I could read it.
I knew it existed.
Yes, but like that sounds like really hilarious.
Yeah, just reading the fucking summary in the email, we're cracking up. It's so good. Okay, I'll read another one. This is from Gizma. Greetings from Gizma. I'm a big sucker for comedy, so yeah, I like the SBC. They're over the top, silly from our POV, yet completely serious within their own universe. Which is the best kind of humor, in my opinion.
Yep.
That's me, not Gizma. They keep talking about all the things as if they make total sense, and we just have to accept them. Case Liquid Right. Right?
Liquid White.
Isn't that from your...
Liquid
White. Yeah. Comma, right. Like, of course, their specific method of punching sharks so hard they become long-range missiles, so why wouldn't there be? I also like when an unrelated anomaly has a test log and a test involves a shark, and you can just know what's going to happen. Like in an SCP-3920 test on the Sharknado movie, had the 3922A punch the sharks away.
There's even a Wilson's Wildlife format where they're talking around the fact that it's a shark, and you're like, oh, fuck, is there a collapsible at the end of this? There is. I know what's happening.
So good. It didn't have good punchlines, which is only fitting.
Punchlines.
Yeah. They said, with such specific gimmick, I feel they can easily get old quick. That's why I prefer to read their content only once in a while rather than a bunch of articles at once. And now for the question. Do any of you have any plans to write something with the SPC?
I didn't, but now I do. Not specifically, but now I do.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Victim and SCBC needs to have an overview. That's happening. It's 100% happening. Like a kung fu movie. I don't know. I'm not sure what it is going to be yet, but it's
the Grand Victim Horror article, but it's solely an SPC in the SPC universe, so it's completely unclear how much is applicable.
Yes, only the SPC VTM has any lore.
Maybe, that's pretty funny. I've been playing with, because I've been doing it on Twitter, and somebody asked me if the Victim Twitter is canon, and I said absolutely, in so much as you can trust anything that Victim tells you. So I was gonna plan on having it be our Victim that just happened to have access to SPC Universe, because I don't know. They just do.
Are you confirming that Victim has canonically claimed to have metaphysical ownership over the number 13?
Well, yeah,
13
now.
indeed.
They took it.
Yeah,
you can't make meme jokes that no one's going to get outside of Discord.
I think we've proven that he can.
It can. It just doesn't work.
So anyway, I think I'll have to write an SPC. It's been pointed out to me once or twice that I somehow got over 100 articles with 0 GOI formats.
Oh wow, yeah. I don't have any GOI formats either. Oh no, I guess Parawatch counts, huh?
No, it doesn't, because they're just tails apparently. I think that's stupid, but they're not GOI formats.
Okay.
You hear that? You hear that, tagging team? Come at me.
All right.
They probably got a really clever and reasoned explanation, and if any of them were listening, which none of them are, they'd be able to explain it to me.
Yeah, there's a challenge. Not from me. I didn't do anything. It was Harry. Anyway, Lord, you want to get this last one from Randy?
Sure. So this is from Randy, and hi. The Serpent's Hand episode has motivated me to read some things on Wander's Library. I'll do it at some point, yeah. Now, I have no idea what Shark Punching Center is about, so this must be fun. And the question, in your opinion, what writing trope is overrated and annoying, yet you have used it / will use it? And that's about it. And Randy wished us a nice day with a smiley face, so thank you, Randy.
Yeah.
Randy's the best. They've done some awesome art for Victim. I think 3 pieces so far. So cool.
Yeah, they're great.
I don't know. What do you guys think about tropes that you dislike but you have used?
Well, I am just so tempted just to say right now that I actually hate the Shark Punching Center. But obviously that's not true. It's
that'd be so good if you were like, actually, it's time to come clean. I fucking hate the Shark Punching Center. I felt constrained by this, and I don't want to do it anymore, and this is how I'm going to tell people.
2-hour conversation that ends with, and this is why I hated doing all of this.
This is why I will never, ever do another SPC article.
Articles that go, this didn't happen in our universe, but it appeared in the database from an alternate universe because the author lacks the courage of their convictions. That's one I hate. And no, I won't
like the
use
Resno canon?
And the Giant Tail series that I'm writing that's full of timelines that end up not having happened? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't like that one either, but I don't...
I like tons of articles that do it, but it lowers their quality universally. It makes 6,000 worse. It makes 5,000 worse. Where it makes Ralston 6K worse. It makes every article that uses it worse, even if they're great.
Yeah, it reduces stakes.
Don't worry, none of this happened. Here's an epic story that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. Congratulations on weakening your own story.
Yeah, I guess mine is kind of a reaction or a version of that because I've always kind of hated dream sequences in stories. Always. And I especially hate it when somebody wakes up at the end and it's all bullshit. Anime. I've noticed several animes that worked out like this where it's it's just kidding. It's just all in your head or whatever. It's why when I was younger I disliked Star Trek so much because I happened to catch a few where it was I remember one where it was the holodeck had taken over the entire ship somehow, and the people thought they were in 1800s London or something. And I was 11 or something when I watched it, so I can't be trusted. But I thought that's what the whole show was about, and so I was just but I haven't done that specifically, but I've used dream sequences several times in stories on SCP stuff, and I've used it specifically to kind of subvert that because in those stories like 5923 or 6602, what happens in those dreamy moments is actually very important. It just happens to happen in dreams. But I really, really hate dream sequences in stories because it's always just I want to get philosophical and metaphorical, but it doesn't matter. Don't worry, it didn't happen.
I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, but being an old person, and I decided to reference something that was even older than I am with the comedy of Bob Newhart. Have you seen? Have you heard of or seen how the second of his famous TV series ended?
Yes. Yeah,
I'm just going to spoil it because no one's going out there and watching it.
Yeah.
But Bob Newhart was a comedian who was known for being very dry and droll, and he had 2 really popular long-running sitcoms. And one of them, he was, I think, a psychiatrist, and then the other one, he operated an inn in Vermont. And the first one was the psychiatrist one, and it went for like 7 years or something. And the second one went for an almost equal amount of time. And in the last episode of this show, like a decade after the original show, he woke up in bed with his wife from the original show, and that whole show was a dream that happened in the first show.
Which is so fucking meta and like bad, but also
it's like the perfect, only good example of that crazy idea.
At some point it becomes
so off the wall.
Hilarious. Like it wraps back around.
Yeah. Because nobody expect, like, it's okay, you could have like the Dallas garbage where they had a character die and then they had to bring him back, so they went, oh, that whole season was somebody's dream. Like, well, fuck you. But it's an entirely different thing to go, this entire show was a dream because it was a dream happening to the same actor in a completely different show. That's amazing. That's pataphysics, baby.
No, that's pretty good, yeah. But in general,
it sucks. Don't do it.
It's happened a lot. It happens a lot. There's a lot of sort of unoriginal books that have, like, if not ended that way, then it's like you said, something really important or like earth-shaking happens, and then it's like, just kidding, it didn't really happen. Or it's the same reason I don't like time travel. Like, I, in general, do not like, we have to go back and change it. Nope, I'm out.
Right. The thing is that what changes...
Not to say that there isn't good stories with that. There is. Some of them are in 6500, but I dislike the trope.
Something meaningful has to change for the characters in the course of a story, so that if the events of the story are reverted, the characters still have to have progressed. There still has to have been a meaning to it. Otherwise, it's a cheap cop-out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I also kind of don't like it when it's the only changes in someone's personal experience. Like, I kind of want the world to be a living place, and because I don't need things to be realistic, but like I do like to tell fairly grounded stories. So like consequences have to matter, not just to our protagonists, but to the people around them. But anyway, I don't know. Lord, you got an answer?
Well, for the thing is, I honestly don't think, the thing is, there's really not that much that comes directly to the top of my mind, because if the writing trope is genuinely something I don't really like, I end up just not using it except to subvert it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, my answer was a fucking fake out too, because same.
Yeah, because I mean, sure, I can say that I seriously dislike how harem anime handles its characterizations, but I don't write that kind of fiction either, and I don't even consume that kind of fiction. So it's.
Yeah, why would you? There was already the perfect one, and that's Tenchi Muya. Nothing else has ever come close. So.
But yeah, you see where I'm coming from. It's.
Yeah, I mean, it's why I haven't yet actually written anything with mecha, because I love that trope, but I also think it is about as deep as a fucking puddle. And I'm not to say that there aren't deep stories that use mecha. In fact, lots of anime and video games have, and are very deep. But the tropes associated with certain genres are completely uninteresting to me. Mm-hmm. I'm sure I have a Western in me somewhere, but I'm not in a rush to run out there and write one.
I find it amazing that this was the answer that Lord gave. That our inveterate shitstirrer's response to the question asked of 3 authors, what thing other people write pisses you off and you either won't do or will do? And you asked that question to Lord, and his answer was, when things piss me off and aren't good, I don't think about them, I do something else. It's like, are you trolling us now? You just took the opportunity to shit talk other people's writing, and you went, no thank you, I'll take the high road.
Well, in all fairness, it's more fun to vague post on the SCP Wiki itself.
You're not that vague. I don't know if you know, but...
Anyways,
yes. Yeah, I think that should wrap us up there.
From Search Wandsman.
Anyway, no comment. But Our Twitter is at SIMCREAT. My Twitter is at Grigory Karpin. Harry?
At Hairblank SCP.
Lord doesn't have a Twitter.
And I won't.
Because he's so much better than us.
Best.
But our email is at simplycreativepeople@gmail.com. Thank you for all the people that send in emails. I only sent out the tweet today about saying we haven't gotten any emails because I forgot to send it out, and we got like 5 really good ones. So
Huzzah.
Thanks to everyone. But I think that's going to do it, and we're going to get out of here.
Yeah,
So,
keep smiling, you sons of bitches.
Yep.
Yeah, go punch those sharks because they're not going to punch themselves.